All right, it's time for a little watch talk. I've been kind of getting back into having watches. I had eschewed wearing the watch for many years. That's because primarily I worked as a bouncer, and in the couple scraps that I've had on the street as a younger man. Now I'm a middle-aged man and I'm not a bouncer anymore, and I don't fight. I don't have any fist fights or anything, but I had a couple on the trains and stuff like that in my 20s, and it's pretty, I don't know, it seems almost unavoidable. In New York City, there's a lot of people just looking to cuck you, and there's aggressive panhandling, there's harassment, there's a lot of mentally ill people, there's a lot of goons and thugs. So anyway, I had eschewed wearing a watch because one, I had found it impractical. Now in the advent of having your cell phone that always has the time on it, it's being updated constantly by a satellite. But what had happened was about 2 or 3 years ago, I had decided I'm not going to do the bouncing anymore. And so I got back into regular security work, hotel security, office building security. And so I hadn't really worn suits and stuff like that in years, because that was, that when I worked in the hotels back in the 90s, I had some very nice suits. All my suits were tailor-made, and that's how I would go to work. But then as I transitioned into the bouncing full time, I found that the watch would just scrape against somebody and hurt them, or I would lose it, most likely, as I did lose a Bulova about 20 years ago on the train when I had to crack some guy. So when the cops came, I had witnesses that were telling the cops the guy was fucking with me. And if you saw me, you would be like, why would you fuck with that guy? But, these guys are on drugs and they're crazy, and sometimes they have a kind of a stereotype of a guy with glasses, big white guy being soft and stuff like that. So I didn't want to get arrested because I was fucking this guy up pretty good, but when I think about it, the guy probably had about 10 warrants, so he didn't want any problems with the cops. But anyway, as I was formulating my story for the police, I realized that my watch had popped off from the stress, flexing the forearm muscle or whatever, and flown off my wrist in the melee. And actually, out of the corner of my eye, I saw one of the cops scoop it up, and I was just more intent on not getting locked up, and I just didn't say anything. I was more concentrated on just getting out of that particular situation. So I took a loss of about $350. That was a nicer Bulova, and that was in my early 20s, when I was about 24, 25, that happened. And back then I thought that, my father had a Bulova, his father had a Bulova. I knew it wasn't the best watch in the world, but I really thought it was a solid watch. And, as time went by and the quartz movement came, Bulova kind of degenerated to a piece of shit. And I still am, today I'm wearing my Marine Star. In fact, it's a little loose right now, the bracelet, but that's my old Marine Star from like 1998. But I wear more out of sentimental reasons, because it reminds me of my father, who was a Bulova guy. But I'm well on my way to having a much nicer watch. Now I'm becoming a Rolex and a Gigi Lecoultre guy. So I'll be having a few pieces within the next year or so. I mean, I could conceivably just buy right now, but I really don't want to dip into my savings. Although if the right watch comes along, because especially right now, Rolex is hard to get in the steel sports line, or the professional line as they refer to it. They're very hard to get. So if the right one comes along, I will just dip into my savings and buy it outright. But right now I've got one laid away, and I'm satisfied with that arrangement. And I'll probably get it in about 7 months. It's a pretty expensive one. But yeah, back to Bulova. So in my life, in my early 20s, I was making pretty good money, and I thought it was hot shit. So I bought 3 watches back then. I had the aforementioned Bulova that I lost in the train melee to a cop. That was like $350. And then I have the Marine Star that I'm wearing now. It was $375. And then I had an Accutron. Accutron is made by Bulova. It was their high-end watch. Now it's discontinued and they call it something else. So that Accutron had an $1,100 price tag. So, back in the late 90s, an $1,100 watch is probably like a $2,000 watch now. And I bought it from their store. Bulova's New York based. It's in Queens and Woodside, and they had a factory, and there was a small store at the entrance to the factory. It was probably, I don't know, 250 square feet or something, and they had usually in that store they had maybe 30-40 models you could pick from. So this $1,100 watch, I think I got it for like $650 or $7, and it was refurbished though. That's the thing, and they didn't do a good job of refurbishing this thing, because I had major problems with the crown, and the thing just stopped working. And I had submitted it for repair once, and the repair lasted, I don't know, maybe a year or something, and I started having problems again with the fucking thing. So I just probably made a stupid move and submitted it once again for repair. And now that I've evaluated my decision, I'm not going to, if they come back with an exorbitant repair price, I already have this Marine Star as kind of a keepsake of that era, and as a reminder of my father and stuff like that. So if they come back with an exorbitant repair price for this Accutron, like over $200 or something, I think I'm going to draw the line around $225. And if they tell me it's like more than that, it's just not worth it. I could be slapping that money down towards a Rolex or a Gigi Lecoultre or even a Omega. It's not worth my time to pay that much money to repair a shitter. So we'll see what happens. Bulova's really declined over the years. And when I call the service department, it's just they don't really have enough staff there, and it's really they're not maintaining records very well, and nobody seems really eager to help you or anything. And now they even closed the factory store. You can't go in person. That was kind of a plus. Living in New York City, I can just go over there in person and speak to somebody and leave the thing there in person and get it repaired. And I had even though the factory is only like 3 miles away from where I live, they close the store down and they don't let you walk in anymore. So I had to mail the friggin' thing in for $17 or something. And when they mail it back to me, it's going to be like $13, I think. So just to get this thing looked at is like $30. And it's really, kind of a subpar watch. I'm more in love with the aesthetics of that watch. That Accutron, I don't have a reference number, but it It's a very nice looking watch. It's a stainless steel bracelet, and the bracelet, the configuration of the bracelet is really aesthetically pleasing. And then the dial is really nice. It's kind of an uncommon color for a dial. It's kind of like this. It's a slate blue, basically. There's a little something more to it, and it's very, again, just like the bracelet, it's very aesthetically pleasing. So I would like to get this thing fixed, get a couple of extra links on it, because when I bought this thing, I was 24 or 25-year-old man, and I was only about, I don't know, 220 pounds, 230 pounds. And now I'm a middle-aged man. I'm 307 pounds. And my forearms got bigger and my wrists got bigger. So it needs to be extended. And it needs to be serviced. I have a feeling they're going to call me back, and it's just going to be an exorbitant repair price, like $350. And boy, I could really pick up a nice watch, and that would be a kind of like a half a payment towards it or something. Like maybe if I want to pick up a Milgauss, or I want to pick up a Omega Speedmaster or something, or anything, or even if I wanted to get new Accutron, or I could try to find that particular model online used and just buy it used. These Accutrons and these Bulovas, like I said in another video, you don't get anything for them. It's all sentimental value. And I walked into a pawn shop and just made a general inquiry to see what I can get if I unloaded them. They won't even look at them. They will not even physically look at them. They just kind of brush you off. It's not the watch. It's shit. It's quartz movements and Japanese, and they don't care. Nobody is. It would just take up space in their store. Nobody would go to a pawn shop hoping to find a deal on a Bulova or even an Accutron. So that, once again, that reinforces the idea that maybe I just keep this Marine Star as a keepsake of that era and a reminder of my father, and just get rid of that Accutron. Say fuck it. Anyway, all right, that's my video.